Hey guys, this is Faster U4 brought to you by Fitland, Tailwind Nutrition, Biomaxa and Capital Cycles. If you're a cyclist, you want to go faster? Then let's giddy up. Hey guys, welcome back to Fast U4, brought to you by Fitland, Tailwind Nutrition, Biomaxa and Capital Cycles. So, I have thoughts about this time of year in training, as I have had thoughts before. I hope it's not too windy for you. I've got the fan on here in the lounge, doing a little bit of Zwifting, and that has been, I'll turn the fan off for a sec, that'll help. Let's help this time of year with training. I have thoughts on some course recons and stuff we've been doing as well. So let me start off. This should be shorter than normal. We start off with the kids who were trapped in the cave in Thailand. Now, on the face of it, not immediately a cycling related topic of discussion. However, one thing that made me think about them and about cycling was the notion of perseverance. So I was listening to the radio and they were talking about the way that the first couple of kids who were rescued talked about getting through being in a wildly uncomfortable place was through meditation. Now, I don't meditate particularly, but I did this thing on the bike that was sort of related. And there's meditation sort of in the moment, in the micro and the macro sense. So, I think the way they meant it was because in their culture, the actual act of meditation is sort of culturally built in, I think, to Buddhist people. Believe it or not, I studied a paper on Buddhism in my wildly useless arts degree in the late 90s. The best thing I got out of Buddhism was two things. One, the idea of stop announcing to everyone the way they should do things and live by example. That was number one. And number two, because you can't change people, that people only change on their own accord. So you can live life and set a good example, and that people will choose to use that, take from that and change themselves, or they won't. But you can't run around announcing that people are, declaring certain behaviours good or bad or anything else, because people won't listen. The best way to influence people is to live a caring and generous, reasonable and reasoned existence yourself. So that's one thing about Buddhism. And I like that. Number two was that meditation is wildly important. And I don't mean, I mean as an actual part of life to get you towards the ultimate peace and serenity, which was Dharma, which was Gautama Buddha's ultimate reason for living. And meditation was the way you get there. And it has a horrible implication these days, meditation, conjuring up pictures of hippies in tie-dye pants, various communists. But the most important thing about meditation is to clear your mind and live in the moment. Feel joy, or you don't have to feel anything, just live in the moment. So I think what's going on, or when you live in the moment, you can I keep wanting to use different words to describe a notion that isn't really easily describable. When you live in the moment, you stop comparing. So like you think about how this might apply to cycling is that, you might find it hard to do repeated hill climb intervals at your threshold power because it's painful. It's only painful compared to not pain. And non-pain is only non-pain compared to pain. What meditation is about forgetting all those comparisons and living in the now. This is what it is now. And there's lots of implications it has for life in the wider sense. I mean, everyone kind of knows intrinsically this one, which is like you can't enjoy time off work if you don't work hard. You can't enjoy dessert if all you're ever eating is dessert. You can't enjoy booze if you're drinking heavily all the time. So everyone understands that, the basics of that. And meditation tells you live in the now. And I have a kind of an addition to this, which is not very Buddhist, probably, but it's the my little addition to the meditation part, which is when I'm meditating, it's on the bike. A lot of us know the sensation of that. When you can clear your mind from other things, you're kind of meditating a little bit. The sort of addition I have, you can be meditating on the bike, you can be meditating while working out at the gym, you could be meditating almost on some flow state while you're doing work, whatever it is. But what I'm saying is, maybe a good move is to, before you decide that you're going to go into this state of meditation, think clearly about how is it good to be investing that time in doing it. So kind of let me bring this full circle a little bit. When this time of year, there's a lot of, sometimes there's training to be done in different weathers. Sometimes there's training to be done in your lounge, like I'm doing now, because it's raining outside and you don't want to get all wet and nasty. And sometimes these things require some perseverance and some meditation to be done, to live in the moment and forget the comparisons of times when you're outside and it's sunny and it's more enjoyable. And the bit I add to that is, just as long as you have a plan, kind of a template or a long-term plan that you're doing these things based on, that you know you need to be doing it, and then you can go into these meditation states to get through them. I think that's the key. So these boys who are trapped in the cave are, they know their ultimate long-term plan is to get out alive. That's the long-term plan. So they know in the moment it's going to be cold, it's going to be dark, it's going to be wet, it's going to be uncomfortable. They might get hungry, but they have a finishing line goal, which is to step out of the cave and be alive, see their parents. And they know that to get there, they need to meditate their way through this next part. Meditation is about, forgetting for a minute about everything else and focusing on the 6 inches in front of your face. And if you can do that, and you're doing it because the outcome will match your long-term goals, I think that's a biggie. The long-term goal for a Buddhist, by the way, you might ask, well, it's got nothing to do with cycling. It's to do with reaching a state of what is termed nirvana. I'm not entirely sure, even after studying a paper on it, I'm entirely clear on what that looks like. Maybe it's like a Buddhist version of heaven. Now, I'm not down with the notion that meditating enough will get you there. Maybe, I don't know, I'm no Buddhist. But I do know that applying some of these principles to your cycling when you have to be indoors, you have to be riding FTP hill climbs, you have to be doing things that are going to get you, you have to be doing things, you can apply that to your bigger goal, cycling. Now that doesn't have to be winning a race, it could be competing in the first place, but the point is, your nirvana for the Buddhists is like you and your events. You follow me? The way to get there, at least part of it I think, is meditation. That's what I'd say about that. And the next bit so to talk about is meditate on this. The North Island series of races. We have done a recon ride of race number 3. Now, it was originally supposed to be, I'm going to tell, I'm sweaty, a recon ride of race number 2. Race number 2 is the one that goes out towards Cape Palliser. But when we went and we're riding out on the road towards Cape Palliser, the gale force winds were so bad we had to turn around. Some of the guys were getting blown into the grass and rethink that plan. So we went into the valley over the big hill into the valley for dig course number 3. So this is one, if you're looking at doing the North Island Team Series, this one is sort of like probably one of the harder ones because it's so hilly and includes one big long climb. Now there has been a change as well, I'll tell you about in a sec. So you're going to come out of Mountainborough, you're going to turn left, you'll be climbing immediately. Series of hills and long fast descents, be careful. Fast forward to about 30 k's in and you are at T Homer something hill, which is got the windmills on it. Gets super windy up there, but it's a 12 to 15 minute climb at race pace. So you're going to need to understand, here's my thing, if you want to know, if you have a goal in mind where you want to finish, have a look, do some Strava stalking, look at watts per kilo for some of the riders who achieved, who you can compete with, and practice doing some climbs at that watt per kilo, because on an event like this, it's wildly important power to weight at threshold. See what you can hold for 10 to 15 minutes. If you can't hold, if you know that to be in the front group you're going to need 4 watts per kilo, so if you're 80 kilos, it's 320 watts. on average, and you know that you can only do 300, you may have to readjust your plans or readjust your tactics. So, you know, it might be that tactically you need to do something else other than just wait to fall off the train on the climb. If that's your plan, you may need to attack earlier, something like that. You may need to accept a loss and descend faster, and accept the risks that go with that. There might be all sorts of things you need to do. Think it out ahead of time and do some stalking. Then it's into the valley, winding kind of valley roads, a turnaround at a gravel road section about the 40k or 35k mark and back. And of course you're going to come back over the same climb, the one with the windmills. It's not quite as steep. It's windy and more exposed. It's actually, when you look at it in terms of grade and length, it is actually very similar to the first site, just looks different. It's about a climb of maybe 250 to 350 vertical meters, average grade of something like 6 to 8%, so it's a nice climb. Okay, so then you come over the few climbs coming back to Martinborough, and here's the bit that's changed. There used to be a gravel sector called Shooting Butts Road, and it still is, which you used to do twice, a road of maybe 1.5 to 2 k's on gravel. It wasn't really highly selective, but then again it could have been if there was accidents and things on there, depending on the condition of the gravel. But it's not going to matter this year because they have already paved half of it in kind of like a nasty coarse chip, but still miles faster than the gravel. And it looks, from what I could see, like they were intending to pave the whole lot. So the point is, that won't be, it'll be a little faster this year, less dangerous, probably no gravel there to speak of or to worry about. So I think that's how it's going to roll for course number 3. Now, course number 2 goes out to Cape Palliser. I talked about it last week, and the main feature is a large climb about halfway through, a little bit like course 3, but on the coast. Lots of little hazards and obstacles like gravel, cattle grates, stuff like that. We will be pre-riding that course, weather playing along, 9 a.m, Cafe Medici, this Saturday. Come along, we've been getting some good numbers to these pre-rides. We're just swapping it out at tempo pace most of the ride, not leaving anyone behind, and it's a lot of fun. And you know, it's almost like, okay, yeah, it can be a bit windy this time of year, although the forecast is quite good so far. You know, that's not bad for your skills to be able to ride in the echelon and lap it out in a group. So I'd recommend coming along and doing that, at the very least having a go at pre-riding a couple of courses. One more thing I'd say about that is that, let's just talk for a second about wind and echelons and what that means. So, you know, an echelon is where, you know, an echelon shape is where you ride, the riders, the draft don't immediately ride one behind the other. What you're going to do, you know, I know a lot of people know this, but this is kind of for people in the lower grades who may not have experienced much of this before or are newish to racing. An echelon is where, say the wind is coming from one side, you ride a little bit behind and a little bit to the side of the rider in front to account for the yaw angle of the wind to get more drafting. So what am I saying? I'm saying if you're riding along and you have a crosswind from the right, you are going to want to ride a little behind and a little to the left of the rider in front of you, on the basis that the wind vector will you'll be sheltered a little more, which obviously makes a lot of sense, and vice versa on the left, right, slightly to the right. I'd say just if you're not really experienced with this, and it can be gusty, so you want to make sure that you're leaving, say if you accidentally cross wheels, leave it so that your wheel is behind the wheel of the guy in front or the woman in front. You know what I mean? So if you swerve and there's a gust or something, you can swerve and you're not going to hit the wheel and cause a crash. So you're going to be behind the wheel. So you can imagine if you moved in a lateral direction, you're not going to hit the wheel. And kind of practice doing it and judging by the strength of the wind how far laterally you need to be behind the person to get the maximum shoulder. It can be really surprising, and sometimes, if the speed isn't that high and the wind is strong, you can end up almost riding next to someone within reason to, as long as it's safe, to shelter from the wind, because it provides a big difference. And I did some testing, and drafting, we all know that there's a huge difference, but to put it in perspective, say it's commonly thrown around about a 30% power difference for the person drafting. And putting it in percentage is a pretty good idea, because it's will be relatively linear depending on wind. So what I'm saying is, if you're drafting someone who is on the front, assuming similar body shapes and everything, at 300 watts, you're likely to be at about 270, around about. And of course, it's going to be the same for you. Now, that can change a little bit if the guy on the front is smaller. You get less draft, bigger draft. I have tested this with exactly the same brand of calibrated power meter between me and another guy a number of times on these rides, and it's absolutely accurate. 25 to 30% is very replicable for drafting. So here's what I'm saying, is if you know this, that can be important, because let's say your FTP's 300 watts. Anytime you're above that, it's a little bit like your fuel tank runs down a lot faster. It's kind of like, think of the point, fighter plane analogy. If jet fighter plane has a jet engine on a military aircraft, you have a thing called an afterburner. So you reach a detent on the throttle, you push the throttle up to say full military power, and then there's a detent, you can push the throttle past that. That is afterburner. The afterburner dumps a lot of fuel into the engine, which is burnt much less efficiently, but provides a gigantic increase in thrust for times when it's important, such as in a combat scenario or something like that. Now, I want you to think of your power band as like the throttle in a jet airplane. You want to have as high aerobic power as you can, up to FTP. FTP is like the detent where the afterburner starts, and you can certainly go into afterburner, and you might even be able to do it for a while, depending on how your VO2 max is. Think of that as like your fuel capacity almost. But it eats into your fuel at a much higher rate than it does up to full military power. So you think of, there are airplanes which have the ability to super cruise. So up until the 80s, military aircraft were never really capable of exceeding the speed of sound, going supersonic, without the use of an afterburner. But various airplanes, including the F-22 Raptor, were unusual in their design and their engine technology, in that they can exceed the speed of sound without use of the afterburner feature. so they can travel. So it includes, obviously, their speed is higher, but the point is their speed is higher at the expense of less fuel. So your combat range is vastly extended. So I want you to think of this notion to FTP. If you can go, let's say, I'm going to say about 4 watts per kilo. What is that for me? Okay, let's see. For me, okay. Let's think of Chris Froome as the F22 Raptor of racing cyclists. He can, without hitting 4 millimoles of lactate or FTP, probably produce, I can't remember what his test data showed, probably produce close to 5 watts per kilo. And to put in that perspective, 5 watts per kilo, if you can climb at 5 watts per kilo for more than about 10 minutes as an amateur club cyclist, you can win just about any hilly race, because that is wildly powerful. Well, Chris Froome can pretty much do that all day. As a matter of fact, in the final stage of the Giro, or the final major stage of the Giro, he averaged over almost 6 watts per kilo for an hour, over an hour, at the end of a stage after 3 weeks racing in the Giro. So that's likely to indicate he may have an FTP, or if he's producing his efficiency is so great, he's having to burn very little fuel to go over 5 watts per kilo. So think of any aeroplane that can super cruise. It's kind of like being able to do 5 watts per kilo without going anaerobic at all, without hitting your FTP. That's your F22. And so back to drafting. Here's the thing. If you have to be constantly, if you're in a race and you're in a breakaway and you're constantly, imagine this notion where you've got your throttle pegged at full military power, and then you have to keep putting it when you go on the front, or even if you're drafting, you have to keep putting your throttle into afterburner just to keep going at the same rate. You are gonna, you're really gonna run out of fuel fast. But if you can just hold it back, just save from going into afterburner, so your FTP is 300 watts and you can sit there at 280, 290, you're gonna last a lot longer, have a lot more energy left, be a lot less fatigue at the end. So use the drafting. If someone's on the front at 300, you're gonna be there at about 270. If you're taking too many turns at the front, you're gonna be 300, 310, 320, 330 when you're coming through on your turns. It's going into afterburner and you're gonna fade super fast. So learn how to draft, not only when it's easy and you can just sit behind someone, but in the crosswinds when you need to know how to form an echelon, and you save that energy by doing that. That's what I think. So good luck with that. I will hopefully see you guys on the weekend. There you go. I've been meditating away for close to half an hour, talking to you inside during that recovery ride while it rains outside, and it's no problem at all. It's meditation, getting lost in the moment. Thanks, and it's a good news story for everyone to take on board when a bunch of kids get saved from a cave by a bunch of badass Navy SEALs. That is something worthwhile smiling about. That's what I think. I'll leave you with that. As always, as fast you fools, what you buy Fit Lab. Tailwind Nutrition, Biomaxa and Capital Cycles for you. Would like a training plan from me? Email me, steve@fitlab.co.nz. Go to fitlab.co.nz. I'll see you on the weekend.